Well, in that case, let us all rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance
Pledge
to
allegiance
the
to the flag
flag of the United
the
States of
United States
America,
and to the republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God,
indivisible, with
indivisible,
liberty and justice for
liberty
all.
and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Fryrick,
Here.
Mr. Posnell,
Here.
Mr. Robinson,
Here.
Mr. Sanders.
He is not going to be here.
Okay. Mr. Scalette.
And he may not be back either. He may not be here either.
Okay. Mrs. Schrader,
Here.
Mr. Sears,
Here.
Mr. Sullivan,
Here.
Mr. Tillman.
Here.
7 members present.
Thank you. Please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking or raising an issue. We have the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting of January 11th available online. Are there any corrections or changes? Otherwise, they can be approved as submitted. Hearing none, they can be approved. Mr. Sears, Treasurer's Report.
Excuse me, did you want to do public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that, didn't I? Yeah, let's do public comment.
Slow down on the scroll, please.
Everyone have time to finish?
Yes, thank you.
I'll take that as a yes. Thank you. Mr. Sears.
All right, I'll start the treasurer's report as usual with a little interest update. Around 32,000 in December, which is down slightly from 33,000 in November. Consent agenda, would any board member like any of the items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below mentioned items.
Second? Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? This can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you. Let's see. The board negotiating committee met in virtual meeting format on January 4th, 2021 and on January 19th of 2021 as permitted by section 707 of the Sunshine Act. No official action was taken. The board also met in executive session in virtual meeting format prior to this meeting as permitted by section 707 of the Sunshine Act for the purpose of discussing matters of negotiation. Again, no official action was taken. Before I get to C, I would like to mention to everybody listening that every 2 years, we have an opportunity to re-elect board members. So half of the board runs for election or re-election every 2 years. We're coming up on that time now, so people in the community, I would urge you to get involved. The cutoff date, I believe, is February the 16th to begin to start taking sign-ins. So if you're going to start soon, and it has to be completed by, I believe it's March 10th. So you have just about a month to get signatures starting on February the 16th. So that's my public service announcement. If you're interested in focusing on the direction of the school board, now is your chance. And then the next item on the agenda is the administration is recommending the hiring of Carl P. Beard of the Beard Legal Group for labor negotiations at a rate of $185 an hour. This is here because we are facing negotiations for our association, our support staff, and coming up next year, our administrative staff. With the complexity of the negotiations for 3 people and the current financial state we're in, we want to make sure that this is done well and appropriately. And that's why the administration is making this recommendation. So with that, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Do I have a second?
Second, this is Joel.
Oh, thank you. Discussion, questions, comments, thoughts?
Are you contemplating that most of these meetings will be of the virtual nature because he does have a hefty fee for travel time?
I'm expecting yes for a while.
Okay. Is he going to come on board almost immediately following this approval tonight, if it's approved?
I think that would be the hope.
Okay.
Negotiations are ready to go. Other thoughts? Mr. Chuli, could we have a roll call on this, please?
Absolutely. Mr. Tillman,
Yes.
Mrs. Schrader,
No.
Mr. Posnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fryrick,
Yes.
Mr. Sears,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And that concludes my report. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Posnow. January is School Board Member Recognition Month, and I think Wendy has a slide to show you of some of the texts that we will be acquiring or in the process of acquiring for your book plate signatures, which we've asked you to come in when you can and sign the plates. Normally we'd have them at your place tonight in-person meetings, and you'd sign them and we would put them in the book. But these are the books that we place in our libraries that will contain book plates with your signatures in recognition of school board members, current school board members. This is something we started last year. We really like this concept, and it's a nice way to honor school board members with additions to our libraries in our buildings. Okay.
Thank you very much. That's very good of you to remember us. And I think do you want to mention one of the books is illustrated by one of our art teachers and one is
yes,
one is by the daughter of
the upper left-hand corner. ABC, That Sounds Like Me is a book authored by an educator and also illustrated by one of our educators, our teacher at the elementary level. I think she's doing this more often now, and this is her first published work that's publicly available. And I think one of these other books has a link to us somehow, and Wendy, I can't remember what that link is. What's the...
Giving Hope was published by one of our employees' daughter. So our coordinator of buildings and grounds.
That's right.
His daughter published it.
Yeah, Wayne's daughter.
Wayne's daughter.
Yep. So those are the works that will be put in our libraries in recognition of your service to our district. Okay. And tonight's superintendent's report. Get to that. We're now a couple weeks into the third marking period. I'd like to mention two things tonight, one for the near term and one for the long term. For the long-term viability of the school district, we need to resurrect conversations about our facilities, even as we contend with the pandemic. While we have deeper conversations about that in the coming months, we will have deeper conversations about that in the coming months. Meanwhile, we continue to wrestle with the pandemic. Public comments tonight were leading us down this path anyway. We have a learning mode decision that's coming up in February board meetings. We have it tentatively scheduled for February 22nd for the fourth marking period. We're trying to balance education and safety, and we're going to be making a recommendation to the board about learning mode recommendations in the February board meeting. One thing that would help that decision along would be the availability of vaccines, particularly for educators. The vaccine rollout has been frustrating for those of us who would like to increase the availability of in-person learning. Educators fall into Group 1B of the vaccination waves. Those in Group 1A are currently eligible to be vaccinated, but information about acquiring those vaccines has been difficult to obtain. Group 1A has been expanded to include people age 65 and over, and those who have high-risk health issues. We've been encouraging our employees to try to obtain a vaccine if they now qualify in Group 1A, and some do, probably more than we realize. And to date, there's been no information from any level of government about how and when educators will be able to obtain a vaccine. We're doing everything we can to provide the latest vaccination information to our employees in the hopes that they may obtain vaccinations prior to the decision point for marking period 4. As far as long-term facilities and structural goals, in the year leading up to the pandemic, we've been discussing our options to address the district's facilities needs for the long term. That process was put on hold in March of 2020. During the pause, we commissioned a mechanical study that is being finalized and will be presented at the next Property and Finance Committee meeting on February 1st, which is coming up soon. The study will help guide our discussion and planning. Meanwhile, the administration has developed some guided goals. They are broken down into two categories: instructional and physical, plant, and fiscal. So I'll talk about the instructional goals first. The first instructional goal is to create learning spaces that promote collaboration among grade levels and content areas. Improved collaboration among the teaching staff is one positive outcome of the pandemic. There's not a lot of positives about it, but that is one. Teaching is much more than delivering instruction. Planning collaboratively improves that delivery. The non-traditional schedules we have been using this year have provided greater opportunities for teachers to more effectively plan instruction. Any changes we make in the physical plan should be done to improve that collaboration so that students can reap the benefits. The second instructional goal is to provide more equitable access to educational resources, personnel, and programming. The current East-West split of the district makes it more difficult to provide equitable access to educational resources, programming, and personnel. We should look for ways to align the physical plant to allow for more equitable access to resources. And we have 3 physical plant goals. The first one is improve efficiencies in annual ongoing operational costs. Some of our mechanical systems are 3 to 5 decades old. Maintaining them becomes more costly in both repairs and monthly utilities. We should look for opportunities to reduce long-term ongoing costs. The next goal in physical plant and fiscal is address end-of-life and near end-of-life mechanicals and infrastructure for long-term results. Some of the systems that are sold that they may no longer be viable in the next few years. So we'll have to contend with those. The last goal in the fiscal area and physical plant and fiscal area is to effectively manage future personnel costs by taking advantage of physical plant improvements that align with instructional goals. If planned effectively, we could better contend with anticipated enrollment growth by modifying how grade levels are aligned. We should also look for ways to reduce or eliminate the possibility of redistricting should the population shift, decline, or grow. So those are the goals that the administrative team has outlined, or the administrative central office administration has outlined for anticipation of what we may need to do with physical plant needs going forward. And that conversation will start at the Property and Finance Committee meeting on February 1st. Now, one thing I did ask the administrative team to look at was to take those goals, those ideas, and see how it could be done with the existing footprint. And the goals outlined above are designed to help the district's long-term sustainability. To that end, the administrative team was tasked with developing solutions that could meet those goals with the district's existing physical footprint. The team explored all possible options and concluded that there was no way to achieve those goals without modifying the physical footprint. So we did try to make it work with what we had, and we could not find a way to do that. As far as the 2021-22 budget development, tonight, Mrs. Cichuli will be presenting a preliminary budget for next school year. You will see that we face some fiscal challenges, and she will outline those challenges on both the revenue and expenditure sides. This will be the beginning of the process that will end with the adoption of a final budget in May, and then, of course, final adoption in June. And also attached to the report that I'll post tonight is the student enrollment report for December, I should say for January. And that concludes that part of the superintendent's report. Let me get back to.
Can I ask a question, Dr. Williams?
Yes, yes.
So, when you're dealing with the vaccinations for educators, has there been any thought to doing a unified effort of all the school districts in York? I mean, your superintendents and representatives from your associations, and, can we have a, one big site where we do, those who are eligible? I don't know how many teachers that is across, and administrators, perhaps building administrators, and I'm saying this with bated, holding my breath, because I'm one of those that's 75 and I'm waiting for my vaccine yet. So.
Right. Yeah, the superintendents in the various districts have collaborated to try to get WellSpan to deploy such a thing as a mass vaccination site. They do not plan to do that at this point in time. That could change. We're really at their mercy for how they want to distribute the vaccines. I also, actually, as of today, I don't want to name the local pharmacy, but a nearby private pharmacy who is very nearby, who would love to partner with us to issue vaccines to our people. I told them we'd line the teachers up and you could shoot them in the arm and then we can all go on our merry way. And they like the idea, but they won't be getting vaccines until phase 2. So if they got them in phase 1, they'd be more than happy to work with us on that. They won't have them in phase 1. I haven't given up hope on trying to find somebody, but at this point in time, we're encouraging our teachers to obtain a vaccine any way they can. And some have been successful at being able to do that. The appointments that WellSpan has are hard to come by, and it's really potluck whether or not you get an appointment, because you log into their My WellSpan site, and you in one case I talked to somebody who there was appointment showed up. She clicked on it, and by the time she could click on it to get registered for it, somebody else had taken it. So the appointments are so rapidly disappearing when they do appear. So it's really hard, and all we can do is tell our people to try to log in as frequently as possible to try to obtain a vaccine, an appointment for a vaccine.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
it's a challenge.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Along those lines, Dr. Williams, if I could just kind of follow up with that. I'm told there are school districts who have successfully organized for their teachers to get them en masse. If possible, I'm sure you're trying to move heaven and earth, but that would just be wonderful. I mean, we had all of these, what was it, 25 public comments, basically all saying the same thing, that, you know, and we're right there with them in terms of wanting to get students in full time, but, you know, till we have teachers vaccinated, Governor Wolf, if you're listening, kind of thing, I just wish we could do something.
Yeah, agreed. And I talked to that local pharmacy today and explained to them that I'm familiar with a district out in Western PA that actually had that very setup you're talking about. And he said he didn't know where the district was. I did. And he said that district happened to be in a rural area. And I said, yeah, it certainly was in a rural area. He said, yeah, private pharmacies have been given vaccinations in rural areas. Less rural areas, it's the chains. And so I think that's why the local pharmacy would be delighted to work with us and help us out on that. They just don't have the resource. They don't have the stuff. They can't do it. But he took down my contact information, and he will notify us if they are fortunate enough to obtain them, and we'll arrange something as soon as possible. Okay.
I have a couple questions, Tim.
Yeah.
One relates to the discussions with administrators about the facilities. And in those discussions, have we considered any permanent changes in our education model with lessons learned from the COVID timeframe? Or are we essentially going back to what we would consider to be traditional 5-day-a-week brick and mortar attendance on the part of our students?
Yeah, we're leaning toward traditional in-person instruction. That doesn't mean that in-person instruction will be identical to the way it used to be. And maybe you may see some shifts in how instruction is delivered in the classroom.
But you would anticipate having the same population in the schools, however the instruction is put together.
Right.
Fair?
Yeah, they'll all be in school, right. Right.
The other question, can you talk to the issue of equitability across the district? That's something I guess I haven't really heard much about before. Do you have some access issues or examples you could share with us?
Well, without going into too much detail, we have on one side of the district, we have an inordinate number of English language learners. So that presents a resource challenge on one side compared to another. And we also have a higher socioeconomic, economically disadvantaged population on one side as opposed to the other. So that brings along another set of challenges to provide the resources that are needed for students to be successful. So if we have, you know, all of the students in a grade in one location, it makes it easier to get and more efficient to get resources out to people. And that includes driving time, because we have staff that get in a car and go to another building.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, really bothers me that we're paying a teacher's wage to drive in a car. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's silly. So if there's a way to avoid that, we want to do that. So it's about making the best use of the resources, the limited resources we have.
So could we say concentration of resource in one place would be the benefit, that same resource is available immediately across the district?
Across the grade
For
level,
example, if kids in a certain grade level were all in the same building.
correct. See, those are the things we realize at the middle school and the high school, because all the kids are in grades, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 are all in the same building. So we can resource those kids, we can source those kids more easily.
Well, I know in the prior conversations about altering the footprint, there was some discussion about consolidating every child in a given grade in the same building, and then some pushback on that relative to the youngest learners.
Yeah.
So what's the feeling now on the part of the group? That, for example, would all first graders be in the same building? Would all second graders be in the same building?
If you want to maximize your use of resources, yes. Because right now, for, let's say, specials, for example, we may have a teacher or some kind of specialist of some kind who spends one part of the day in one building and then travels to the other building. We're paying for that person to drive in a car. I'd rather pay that person to be in front of kids. It just makes more sense. So that's what we're trying to get to. You're welcome. Any other questions about the report, that part of the report? Okay. The third item, superintendent's report, the administration recommends approval of the proposed 2021-22 school calendar. This was presented last meeting and for a conversation, and now it's up for a vote.
Can I have a
So
motion?
moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions or comments? And this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Okay. And tonight, reports from administrators. We have Dr. Stoltz from Yorkshire and Dr. Adams from the high school. And I think we'll start with Dr. Stoltz.
Right. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'd like to start with 3 bits of Yorkshire news. The first bit of news is that progress reports were made available to our parents today. Excuse me. And these are the written progress reports. At the primary level, there are 4 reporting periods. 2 of them are face-to-face conferences with our parents. 2 of them are written progress reports. So back in October, we had the Zoom to Zoom conferences, and we will have the Zoom to Zoom or face-to-face with our parents again in March. And tomorrow, believe it or not, is the 100th day of school.
Yay!
So at Yorkshire, we have scheduled 100-day-ish activities and special clothing that we will be wearing and such. Thirdly, it is time for kindergarten registration. You might see the yard signs that are around that tell your neighbors, tell your relatives, tell your friends it's time to sign up for kindergarten. This is any child that will be 5 prior to September 1st. And Mr. Staub did a really nice job of putting all of that information in a really clear format on our York Suburban website. So yeah, we're anticipating a big turnout because of our kindergarten numbers this year are quite low, and we are thinking that some people may have redshirted their little ones. So we think we might have a big crowd of kindergartners coming for next year. And then finally, can you give me a thumbs up? Are you seeing my screen? Is my screen shared? Okay, thank you. So I did not want the month to go by without thanking you, our school board members, for our dedicated work. So hopefully you're going to be able to hear this. A big shout out from Yorkshire Elementary School to our York Suburban School Board members. This has certainly been an extraordinary year, but our students come to school each day with a great attitude, ready to learn, and smiles on their face, even behind their masks. And with your support, we have become masters at Zoom, forward learning, TOPS, and how to enhance our instruction digitally and through video. We appreciate the school board's support with all of our different school initiatives. And thank you for keeping your eye on what's most important, students and staff. You're the best. Thank you again, York Suburban School Board members. We applaud you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I thank you as well. You see later in the agenda, my retirement is announced. It's been a great ride. I have enjoyed it all. I'm not doing my parting notes yet, but going back to those parent comments, this is a top-notch school district. Hopefully everyone will stick with us and realize these are tough times, but everyone really is working with the children's best interest in mind. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stoltz. Dr. Adams.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mrs. Irwine, for sharing that. I'm going to start right out with the thank you to our school board. On behalf of the high school administration, the faculty, staff, and the students, I'd certainly like to thank you for everything that you do. I know the time and commitment that you have and the meetings, the readings, these Zoom meetings, and the various things that you take on behalf of us. And I know you do your very best. We certainly appreciate you and thank you for all that you do. With that, I'm going to start to share some of the high school report. The York Suburban Music Department's proud that they were finally able to present to us in virtual fashion through a recording on YouTube, their 2020 holiday concert. Linked it in here, so it'll be in the minutes for anyone to be able to see if you haven't already done so. They only met one time, and then they recorded everything without any dress rehearsals. So our students are very talented, along with the music leaders. When they're working through reduced rehearsal time and only coming together one time, and practices that through in school that can only be partial students there. Certainly would like to say congratulations to our music leaders and our students on a certainly job well done. Next would be some more positive things that are going on at the high school. We have Singing in the Rain this year, a musical on hopefully, tentatively, still scheduled for March 5th and 6th. The musical experience has been different this year, but I can assure you that the directors and the students are thankful that they're going to be able to have a performance. They're battling the quarantines and Zoom sessions through rehearsals, but they're certainly doing a really nice job. Mrs. Cunningham, the director, was able to say that they're having lots of laughs and they can't wait to hear the audience laugh. They can't really predict what the end result's going to be, but she said Singing in the Rain will be one for the books because the show must go on. So we know that we're in for a good treat with all the talent that we have in the high school. Next would be a little plug for anyone who is listening, and school board, the administrators, as well as anyone in the community. Senior mock interviews have been moved from January to April. Mr. Peterson is our lead on that this year, and it's a fantastic opportunity for those of you that are in the workforce to be able to share a little time with our seniors. It's going to happen through Zoom this year, which is a really neat experience for the kids, because I would anticipate, even when things are somewhat back to normal, that a lot of job interviews are going to happen virtually through Zoom. So this is a great experience for our kids. So if you would like to get involved in interviewing some of our seniors, please reach out to Mr. Peterson. We're always looking for people to help with that. It's a great opportunity for our seniors. They get real life experiences sitting through an interview, and then they get that real feedback, which is really good. And we've also heard great comments and feedback from our interviewers. And some of our students have even secured positions or internships as a result of these interviews. So it's a great way for our students to have a real life experience, as well as our community to help with our school system and specifically our seniors. And then we're also thinking about next year. The scheduling process will begin real soon. We have to look and see what that's going to be like for next year. But I can assure you that Dr. Ellis and our school counselors and department chair leaders they'll be ready to roll with the students when it comes time for that scheduling process. And now I'm just going to circle back to one more thank you to the school board members. We greatly appreciate the service that you provide to our school and our school district. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Julie.
Good evening. We have several items for board consideration, beginning with an amendment, a recommendation for the board to approve an amendment with Reliance Transportation for the 2021 school year with a one-year extension to the contract. The amendment has been attached for your review as well.
Do we have a motion?
So moved, Ellen.
Second.
Thank you. Questions, comments? None? Then I guess this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. The second item is also regarding transportation. Before you, you have two bus and van driver recommendations for the 2021 school year as well.
So
Motion,
moved,
please.
Ellen.
Thank you.
Second,
Thank you. Questions or comments? This can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Item C is a consent agenda. You have before you the business office report, which includes items 1 through 5. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, I would.
This is Joel. I'd like number 5 considered separately, please.
Yes, sir. So items 1 through 4. I would ask that a motion be made to approve the below mentioned items.
so moved.
Second, Ellen.
Thank you. Questions or comments about 1 through 4? Then that can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Can I have a motion for number 5?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Joel, you had a question, I think.
Yeah, I support waiving the penalty in this case. I know it's unusual, but due to the timing of the bill, which was around the 1st of July relative to the closing date, which was toward the end of August, the apparent lack of information at settlement, which I'm inferring would have otherwise alerted the current property owner of the situation, and the ongoing issues with our tax collector, not to speak of complications from COVID and the action on the part of the property owner to pay the face amount without objection as soon as he was aware that it was still outstanding. So I'm going to support waiving the penalty.
This is Ellen. I support also waiving the penalty. I think these were new people. Perhaps they didn't receive the information that they should have at closing. And I think as new members to the community, this is something we can do for them. So I will be voting to waive the penalty.
Other comments?
Just to clarify, voting yes is denying their request.
Correct.
Is that right, Kathy?
Yes, it is.
Okay, it seems kind of dealing with double negatives here. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Can we have a roll call vote then, please?
Yes. Mr. Robinson,
No.
Mr. Tillman,
No.
Mr. Posnell,
No.
Mr. Sullivan,
No.
Mrs. Schrader.
Yes.
Motion fails.
You didn't call on me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I already marked you down. That's why.
Okay, sorry.
Sears,
Okay.
Mr. Sears,
No.
Mrs. Fryrick.
No. Okay.
Motion fails. Okay, on to D, informational items. Before you, you have the dining report as well as the sales report. You will notice that for the month of December, we did have a small revenue or profit. However, we're still running in a deficit for the entire year to date. Any questions?
Is there any hope we're gonna ever make up the losses, or we get compensated by some other means, or?
A couple of things. We would have to see how participation continues throughout the school year to see if there's a possibility of making it up. We also have a fund balance in food service that we could use to fill in this gap. And then there is an option to use federal funding to help with food service. So there are three comments, I guess, for your question.
Will you be proposing that we look at one of those at some point in the future?
Yeah, I want to wait at least until March, April to see where we are and how we've been performing since then to make a formal recommendation.
Thank you.
Ms. Catchuli, do you want a vote in the affirmative officially waiving the penalty? Right now you have the denial of the denial.
Sure.
Okay.
So would the board like to consider waiving the penalty tax on the property number provided before you?
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Alan.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments?
Then just see if there's any public comment that pops up because we added that to the agenda.
Okay.
I do not have any additional public comment at this time.
So let's do it again with a roll call vote, and the vote is yes to waive the penalty.
Okay. Mrs. Fryrick,
Yes.
Mr. Posnell,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mrs. Schrader,
No.
Mr. Tillman,
Yes.
Mr. Sears.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item, and what you've been waiting for this entire time, is for the budget presentation. So let me pull that up. Can I get a thumbs up that you see my screen? What screen do you actually see?
We don't see the presentation. We see.
Yeah, we're seeing presenter mode. We're seeing your notes, your speaker notes there.
There you go.
Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so tonight's presentation is a full look at the preliminary budget for 2021. Up until this point, we've reviewed the preliminary information on salary and benefits, and we've also reviewed revenues. And so today, while there's still a lot of uncertainty, we are still required by school code to continue the budget process. Tonight's budget is an unfiltered budget. And so you'll see the requests as they were presented and as they were made. Okay. So tonight's agenda is we'll review the budget timeline as well as the Act 1 deadlines. We'll go over how we're performing for the 2021 school year, and then we'll dig into the 21-22 preliminary budget. We'll have some discussion on some unknowns and what what our next steps are. So our internal timeline, we have quite some work to do. In February is the governor's budget address. Actually, that occurs next Tuesday. If you'd like to watch, it is scheduled for 11 a.m. You can watch it on PCN or stream live it on online. But he will present his budget for 21-22. We've also submitted our opt-out resolution that we adopted in November, and so that is complete. In March, we'll continue to do budget updates. We'll discuss the board's intent for Act 1 index and start working towards the final budget presentation. In April, we'll make a recommendation for the board to approve the proposed final after we provide the board an update of where we are. In May, we are scheduled to do our budget adoption for the 21-22 general fund. So Act 1 provides some deadlines as well. Two major deadlines that we need to be cognizant of are first, in May 31st is the absolute deadline to adopt the proposed final, and then June 30th is the absolute deadline to propose to adopt the final budget. So how are we performing in the current school year? I think we're doing pretty well considering the circumstances that we're in. For revenues, you'll notice that we have received $47.5 million in revenues. That's about 79.16% of our budgeted expenses. You'll notice that we're slightly ahead in the local area, and that's mainly due to some delays in our real estate taxes that we're hoping to close that gap in January. As far as real estate, we've collected 98.82% of the 96% that we've budgeted. So typically we would budget our tax collections at 97%, and we decreased that because of the economic downturn as a result of COVID. Interim taxes are lower than anticipated or lower than they were this time last year. However, EIT, we're having good months and then we have some bad months. So far, we're ahead of last year at $38,777. So far, we've collected 32% of our budgeted revenues in EIT. Delinquent taxes are down. However, transfer taxes, the housing market is doing very well. At first, we had some slow collections, but we are currently ahead of our budget. We budgeted $625,000 for revenues, and we're at $628,000. So we're doing well in that area. On the expenditure side, you'll notice that we're slightly behind where we were last year. And that's really because we've been cautious of our spending. We know that we have expenditures due to COVID, and as a result, we've been holding on to from spending our regular expenses that we've budgeted for. However, now that we're mid-year, we're starting to really look at what we have left and what the needs are. And so we anticipate that some of the planned expenses will actually go through, and we're monitoring that activity. These are our budget goals, and you've seen this as part of our budget presentations in the past. And we will continue to review the budget in these 3 areas that we have. And our goal is to use these as our guiding principles as we make decisions moving forward in terms of our budget. So what are the projections for 21-22? Preliminary revenues are estimated at $60,872,113. This is an increase of $759,000 or 1% over the current year's budget. On the expenditure side, we're projected at $64,344,159. This is a 3.82% increase from the current year, or $3,472,046. And in the next couple slides, we'll dig into the revenues and expenditures. We've made some revenue assumptions. On the local side, we increased the assessed values due to natural growth by $18 million. This budget does not assume a tax increase. However, we've kept the tax collection rate at 96%. Delinquent taxes, transfer taxes, and earned income taxes are also budgeted at the same levels of 2021. IDEA is assumed to be level funded at 2021 actual, and we typically get an IDEA or a preliminary number for IDEA sometime in the spring. And so we hope to adjust this to actual as well. On the state revenue side, we have budgeted that basic ed and special education will assume flat funded at 2021. And as always, Social Security and retirement reimbursement is assumed at 50% of the actual liability. On the federal side, Title I programs, or title programs rather, are assumed flat funded at 2021. And we've also included the CARES federal funding estimates of $1.3 million in this budget. And while I've included this, I just want to caution that we're still trying to vet out ways to efficiently use this fund. It's critical to remember that this is not long-term funding. It will eventually go away. If you recall, back in 2008, 2009, and afterwards, we received stimulus money. A lot of districts use that money to pay for salary and benefits for new staffing. And in the end, they needed to, when the funding went away, they had to either lay off or absorb that funding inside. So we do not want this to become another unfunded mandated program. So revenue breakdown, as you can see, the bulk of our revenues come from local revenues. It's $47 million in local revenues, or 77% of total revenues. State revenues are at 20% and 3% for federal sources. The increase in the revenues are partially due to natural growth in assessed value, which generate $426,000 at the current millage rate, and the increases in Social Security and PSERS reimbursement, and as well as the COVID funding. On the local revenue side, the local revenue makes up, or rather the real estate taxes make up 91% of total revenues and 71% of local revenues and 71% of the total revenue budget. EIT is the second largest revenue source in local at 7% or $3 million. I thought it was important to note that local revenues takes the brunt of how we fund on a per pupil basis. And so the per pupil allocation for real estate taxes is $14,469 per student. Property tax revenue, so our current millage rate is 23.6474. Our adjusted index is 3.6%, which makes our maximum millage rate to be 24.4987 for the 2021 school year. This is an increase in mills of 0.8513. It generates gross increase in revenues at 96% at 1.9 million. The average homeowner tax bill would increase by $133. So I wanted to provide us some different tax scenarios as the board considers different options. And so I've provided from 0 to 3.6. At the bottom is the projected increase for each one of those scenarios and what that increase would be over the 2021 school year. I've also included our tax rate history. So you'll see in column 1 is the fiscal year. Column 2 is the Act 1 index. Column 3 is the our millage rate, and then the last column represents how much we've increased taxes percentage-wise. And I also provided the board with a millage rate comparison within our county, and you'll see where York Suburban falls. I've added the average on the bottom for each of the years. For state revenues, basic ed funding allocation is $2.8 million. It's 4.67% of total revenue budget and 24% of the state revenue budget. The total per pupil allocation for basic education, out of the basic education funding is $966 based on our October 1 enrollment reported to the state. In respect with special education, our allocation is $1.2 million or 2.1% of the total revenues. The total per pupil allocation for special education students is $3,245. I also thought it was important to note that the projected special education budget is over $9 million, which means that 86% of the funding is coming from local sources. And before I move there, I will pause and ask if there are any questions regarding the revenue.
Kathy, it's Joel.
Yes.
Is there a restriction on the way that federal CARES money can be used?
There are restrictions on how the federal CARES money can be used, similar to prior COVID relief money. However, they've added some additional options, which we're looking into. Basically, it states that we could use it to maintain operations. One of the examples is that we could use it to fund salary and benefits of employees that we would have anticipated having to lay off of because of COVID. And so there are some other areas like some facility improvements to ensure the air quality as well, and that we're able to provide social distancing and things like that. So we're looking at each of those areas to see how we can best spend the money.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the expenditure side. For the 21-22 projected expenditures were projected at $64,344,159. This is an increase of $2,956,918, or 4.6% over the current year. Salaries make up the 69% of total expenditures. Salaries are 42% and benefits are 27%. So our top 7 cost drivers, at the very top is the cost of new positions included in the budget. Second is cyber charter school tuition, which we'll get into in the next couple of slides. Salary increases per contract, transportation, contracted services, PSERS net retirement. So this is PSERS after the state reimbursement. And then is the local intermediate unit services for a total increase of $2.9 million.
So Kathy, if I look at that quickly and I look at cyber charter and PSERS, we're talking about over a 1% tax increase just to cover increased costs.
Yes.
Forget all the other stuff.
Of course.
So much for cyber charter being free to the population, huh?
So salary and benefits projections, I've mentioned that salary and benefits make up 69% of our budget. This is a breakdown of each of the classifications and their increases along with the benefits on the bottom. You will notice that I have included the health savings account, the HSA account, employer contribution amounts as well. The next 2 slides are repeats from the prior presentation on salary and benefits, and it just walks you through what assumptions we've made for coming up with our projections. And so I won't read through these. You have them available for review. What I will mention is that this projection does not include column movements or increases to longevity stipends. We did not include an increase in healthcare and dental benefits, nor did we include employment compensation insurance at this time. So the 21-22 requested personnel changes. Here is a breakdown of the requests. We have the autistic support teacher at the high school, and the autistic support teacher at the middle school. This would be a transfer of entity if we were to bring in that class. We have a recommendation for behavior support or internal coach for K-12, special education teacher at the high school. The paraprofessional positions are required when we pull in the autistic support classrooms. We have requests for a business and career development at the high school, an English teacher at the high school, and we are restructuring how we deploy our department leaders in K-12. And I'm going to throw Dr. Krauser off guard a little bit and ask him to say a couple of words on that.
Before we do that, these are new requests, not replacing retirements.
These are new requests.
Growth positions, okay.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chuli. Yeah, the slight adjustment you see in the department leaders, historically, we've maintained a core and non-core department compensation process, which allowed for department leadership really heavy at a secondary end. Through our work and the planning process for the comprehensive plan and our curriculum mapping process revealed clearly we need greater representation across the divisions K to 12 in both a departmental role in leadership, which tends to be more of the management end, budgetary collaboration with the building principal, implementation and ordering of supplies, and then the curricular end, which we're seeing as a content coordinator. How are we getting those to be a collaborative and shared leadership experience? So what we worked to is to diversify those positions. So we took mostly, aside from the $6,500 you see there, the net cost that we had been expending in the prior years, broadening up those scopes to get a shared leadership across the division. So we've opened it up to add more positions, and by sharing the original posted dollars into splitting roles and responsibilities between just the management of the department leadership into both management and instructional and curricular support to help with the curriculum mapping.
Thank you, Dr. Krauser.
Certainly.
Below that are retirement savings. So we have reviewed the resignations and retirements that we've received thus far, and we have declared that they will need to be replacements. But however, we don't replace them at the same level as our outgoing employees. And so the savings that you see there is as a result of starting them lower on the salary scale.
Do we know that number, Kathy? The number of retirements?
I can get that number.
That's all right. That's all right.
Something like 8 or 9 so far. 8. We did 5, 6. I think it might be 8.
I can get you that number after this. And so the total cost for new requests is $706,000. So what we have decided as a central administration is that we're vetting out these requests. We're reviewing them to see how they align with our goals and comprehensive plan, and then we're looking at them from an operational efficiency lens. And so we will be we'll have a discussion at the March Personnel Committee meeting regarding these positions and what our recommendations we would bring to the board. So total PSERS projected costs. You'll see total salaries, and not all salaries. This includes the salary and benefits that we project for based on contract, but we also have extra pay, extra duties. And so that's what you see as far as total salaries. And not all salaries, or rather not all wages, are PSERS eligible. And so if you were to try to multiply 34.94% against the 2021 or the 21-22 total salaries, you won't get this exact number. But our system, we've put perimeters in place to identify which wages are PSERS eligible. However, the gross liability for 21-22 is $9.2 million. After state reimbursement is $4.6 million, and then our increase year over year after state reimbursement is $180,782 for 2021. In the next slide, I show you what this projected PSERS liability is versus our reimbursement from the state. And you can see that the rate is still steadily climbing. However, the increase in PSERS is still exceeding the amount that we receive from the state. This slide shows you the increase of cyber charter schools since the 2010-11 school year. And I put an asterisk next to the 10-11 school year because that was the last year we received I want to say state support for cyber charter. So the increase for 2021 is $766,000. And that is because we have seen a dramatic increase in enrollment. We believe that this enrollment is solely due to the pandemic. However, we cannot assume that this is a 1 year and done. And so to be fiscally responsible, we needed to include or make some assumptions that we would still have a high enrollment for next year. So we're projecting 180 students for 2021. This is an increase of 57 students that over the budget that we've created for 2021. The current enrollment as of January is up 51 students. And you'll see our preliminary tuition rates on the screen. And I say preliminary tuition rates is because this is based off of budget. And we're hoping that there will be some charter school reform that would allow us to move from budget to actual. Our projected charter school costs for 2021-22 is $2.8 million. What we've budgeted for 21-22 is for 2021. Sorry, I have too many dates, too many years I'm messing with. What we've budgeted for 2021 is $2.1 million. And so you'll see the significant increase as we go through this budget season. $1 million. So some local unknowns, local economy challenges. As I stated before, we normally have our real estate collection come in at 97%. For 2021, we've budgeted 96%, which is coming to be true. We're performing the way that we've expected. The housing market is good, but we don't know for certain if that will continue. I believe it will, so long as interest rates are down. EIT is very uncertain. We have good months and we have bad months. Delinquents, taxes, our collections are down. Then there are some concerns from state revenues. Will the state have the ability to either level fund or increase basic education and special education? There's a current deficit of $3.5 billion. And then they're waiting on conversations to see if they'll receive more federal funding to close the gap. There is a concern about minimum wage increase being proposed by the Biden administration, which is not considered in this budget. We have not budgeted for a minimum wage increase. Outcome of negotiations is unknown, and the board's intent to increase taxes or the board's intent to use fund balance is still up for discussion. So what's next? As I mentioned, the governor's budget is next week. And then we have some board meetings and committee meetings that will have some budget updates and some board action at several of these meetings as well. That concludes my presentation, and I'll open the floor for any discussion.
Anybody?
Thank you. We have 9 retirements.
It was close.
Kathy, it's Joel. I know you can't do anything about this, but I'm really stunned at the PSER's projected rates. I think you said they're going down. It looks like they're going up. Did I miss something?
Did I say they're going down?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I meant they're steadily going up.
And do you have any insight from our friends at PSER's as to why they're going up after all the pension reform that helped us out?
Well, Mr. Sears, the pension reform didn't do anything for us in the present day. it's going to take 30, 34 years for us to see any relief from the reform that was done.
I was aware of that. I just wanted to have it on the record. Thank you.
Oh,
I think that you put it there.
But without, I mean, this is one of those things that just drives us crazy from a management standpoint and from a financial standpoint, that significant costs like that are completely out of our control unless we reduce the base. I mean, let's be honest about it. We can't do anything with that percentage. The only thing we can do as a school board is to reduce the base, which is the salary that drives the pension. And I don't mean to say anything other than that. That's the fact of the matter. We just, we're sitting here with our hands tied.
Well, while we're talking about sitting with our hands tied, I'm most annoyed at the cyber charter school figure. Now that we have our own online program, in a perfect world, we should have our students who are making that choice use our TOPS program so that we're not obligated to pay these sky-high fees. Joel said his 2 cents, and I just couldn't resist saying mine.
I'll put 2 on top of that, Lois Ann, and maybe it spills over to what Rich and anybody interested in legislative activity could push, and that's to make sure that with charter school reform comes the ability of school districts who offer a program like TOP to refuse to pay tuition to another school.
I'm with you. That's
Obviously,
exactly
that's a legislative issue, and I think that's something we absolutely have to do to the best of our ability. That $700,000 delta is a choker.
Well, and it took a lot of money and effort, time and man hours to accomplish our goal of creating this program, and we should be able to use it in that regard. So,
well, we can offer it, but at this stage of the game, we can't.
That's right. The only way we can force someone to do it with, oh, go ahead, Lois Ann.
No, I understand that. Again, as I prefaced my statement earlier, in a perfect world.
Yeah.
Again, I summoned Governor Wolf earlier. Governor Wolf, if you're listening, this is the way it ought to be. Now,
I think the only people that you can say they have to go to our school might be folks who we have, who have been suspended or expelled. And we tell them they come to our school, and if they don't like it, they pay to go wherever else. But parenthetically, I am serving on the PSBA Charter Reform Committee. It's interesting we're having this conversation because these are exact sentiments that all of us from around the state are facing, trying to put together some legitimate points that could be made to legislators. Getting that report will be ready soon, we hope, for PSBA. But we're not the only district facing this. I hear from around the state, there's 20 people on this committee, and we all have the same session, as we used to say, bitch sessions. And, it's universal. And we're all trying to figure out how to cut those costs.
misery loves company, but it really doesn't help us.
It does not help us at all.
So Kathy, in one of your earliest slides for 21-22, you're showing a projected $3.5 million deficit. Is that right?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Does that include the 1.7 from the current year?
Well, funny that you say that, because every time we don't increase, we always leave money on the table when we don't increase taxes. And so when we're looking at the following year, we're not able to increase that base that we have. And so every time we use fund balance, or we're projected to use fund balance. Now, not my goal. My goal is always to either break even or come into a surplus. That is a compound, and it does impact our fund balance. So the more we delay looking at whether that be increasing revenue somehow or cutting or doing both, we create a long-term problem.
So if I look at that, and let's assume the worst case, we're looking at about 5.1 million. And I believe we've got about 4.8 in fund balance right now.
Of
So
unassigned.
I think we've got a problem. You know, because we're looking 2 years out and we're essentially broke. That strikes me as a little bit of a problem. Does
Mr. Chuli, Dr. Williams, could you confirm for me, I believe my understanding is correct, that let's call it 1.3 million in CARES 2 funding is both time limited and purpose limited, but one of the allowable purposes for expenditure of those funds is to address learning loss?
That is an allowable expense, yes.
Thank you, sir.
And we have until September of 22 to spend that money. Is that correct, Dr. Ketterman?
That's correct.
So is that it? Is that all the good news you've got for us?
Yes, sir.
All right. Ms. Bowen, cheer us up.
Good evening, everyone. Today I just have a few things to share. First, Minithon is holding a fundraiser at Chipotle tomorrow as the April event date comes closer. Also, juniors of student council right now are working very hard in order to make sure the seniors can hopefully have a prom this year. And lastly, the Green Club is selling chocolate to students at high school to raise money for their club for Valentine's Day. And that concludes the report.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Carly, congratulations on your great swim meet the other day.
Thank you.
Well done. Job well done.
All right, I believe we have the link to the committee meeting schedule online. And Mr. Robinson, Personnel Committee. Mr. Robinson, are you muted?
I would think you've all learned to lip read by now.
Yeah.
You have before you the personnel report, which includes retirement, employment, and volunteer coaches. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below mentioned items.
Just one thing, Mr. Robinson. Mrs. Stoltz, Dr. Stoltz, you will be missed. And thank you for all that you have done for York Suburban.
Thank you for stealing my thunder, Mrs. Fryrick.
Sorry, Mr. Robinson.
So now that thunder is stolen, can we have a second?
Yeah. I'll second it. Go
Be
ahead.
around for a while. They're still
Good.
making me work.
Good.
Any other questions or comments?
Can I ask where this health room assistant is going to be assigned?
Of course you may ask. It's a great question.
The health room assistant will be at Yorkshire Elementary and the middle school.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Cable.
If there are no more questions, this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
And before I conclude my report, Mr. Posnell, I would like to say a special word and recognition of Dr. Stoltz's service, not only to education in general, but to York Suburban in particular, concluding a 24-year career with us. As Mrs. Fryrick said, you will be greatly missed. and hard to replace, if that's possible at all. Thank you very much for your service and for your dedication.
I'm humbled. Thank you. You're welcome.
That concludes my report.
Would you like to keep going with legislative updates?
Of course I would. Well, as you probably all know from reading the news, with the new administration, there are figures that are being thrown around all over the place. 130 billion for school funding nationwide, 350 billion to the states. As Everett Dirksen once said, you take 130 billion and 350, pretty soon it equates to serious money. But as Mrs. Chichuli said, there's uncertainty added with uneasiness and doubt. In other words, the situation is normal in Washington and in Harrisburg. But we can help remedy that situation by signing up for Advocacy Day in March. Now, I heard some sentiments about cyber charter reform. I think it would be nothing better than to have all the members of the York Suburban Board sign up for Advocacy Day and descend on certain legislators to voice our ire and pique at this situation. May I have an amen?
Amen.
Okay. In all seriousness, that's going to be one of the hot topics going forward for PSBA, that mandate reform or mandate relief and more funding, which is always a given. That pretty much sums it up. The good news is that the new minority chair of the Senate Education Committee, Senator Lindsey Williams, is an advocate of charter reform. So we want to make good friends with Senator Williams. Again, if there are no questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Ms. Fryerick.
Yes, under the Lincoln Intermediate Unit report, I have been in touch with Sue Heaston, who is our Dallastown representative and also happens to be chair of the LIU board, to tell me that their budget will be ready to be sent to the districts after their February meeting. The same will pretty much go for the LIU Joint Operating Authority Board. That will come out, I assume, after our next meeting. We only meet quarterly. Unless Mrs. Chichilla, you have any insight or early indications from either one of these entities?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. And from York Adams Academy, I'm really pleased to say that as of last Friday, we have 15 out of our 15 seats are being used, which is good news. Unfortunately, last week, the Learning Center was closed for the entire week because of some COVID cases with the LIU students, forcing our students at York Adams Academy to go on remote learning, but we are getting used to doing this. And we anticipate that tomorrow evening at our meeting, we will pass our budget and it will be forwarded to the districts by the end of this week, hopefully to be seen on our agendas in the month of February for consideration. And that concludes my reports. Thank you.
York Adams Tax Bureau?
No report.
All right. Ms. Schrader, York County School of Technology.
I have no report this evening other than to say thank you for approving the proposed budget for the School of Technology. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. And I think there is a link here to the activities report for anybody interested. I would like to thank everybody that sat through this with us tonight. Thank you for your comments and views.
Are there any more comments?
There are no additional public comments at this time.
And with that, unless there's nothing else, I think we can be adjourned.